one. So again, thank you for taking the time to be here. So essentially, if you have any questions throughout, I'm fine if you just want to ask, and then we can certainly review those as we go along. But I'm going to cue Laura here on slide 2. So growing up in the 21st century, so we have a lot of challenges as parents and guardians, right? Here's a few, and we could talk a little bit more in depth about some of these. But this is probably different than when most of us grew up, and kind of the things that we're challenged with as guardians, as well as what our students and youth are going through, right? So there's a culture of violence and destructions that can be through media, through video games, a variety of ways, really. There's the reality of terrorism, especially since, 9/11, which we experienced, but that has definitely changed our culture and just kind of what the students experience, and it continues to increase, unfortunately. Changes in family structure, it could be the makeup in what our families look like. We have a lot of unique families, which is awesome and brings a lot of great diversity to our communities, but it can also add a layer for some of us that this is maybe a new thing to kind of navigate. Competitive climate. I have seen a lot more youth putting just even pressure on themselves. And so some of our kids that are used to getting straight A's, and maybe if they get that first B, that becomes very, very challenging for some of our youth. And so really, sometimes I see that some of our youth that maybe aren't as used to getting those A's maybe have a little bit more resiliency. And I'm saying maybe because it's not always the case, but there is certainly some truth to that and some possibility that may impact some of our high-performing students. So one thing that I'm guessing many of you are aware, but that I just really want to emphasize, is that this is not, this challenge does not discriminate, right? It does not matter what socioeconomic class you're a part of, what race you are. The risk for suicide affects all people. So as I probably already mentioned, but it's probably impacted you personally in some way, shape, or form. We'll get into some statistics that kind of highlight that and emphasize that as well. Also, earlier sexual development is definitely something that we're challenged with as guardians. And then cyberspace and just this world of, kind of fantasy sometimes that can be a challenge to navigate for our youth and then us as parents. So slide 3, please. So adding all those things to the mix of the fact that our teenage brain, it's kind of an interesting thing in itself. And so much is happening during the adolescent period, and there are definitely a lot of trainings and courses out there, so I would encourage you, if you are curious and want to know a little more about it, they're definitely very fascinating, but it just really complicates matters, the factors, more for us, and it's normal, but it doesn't mean that it makes it easy, right? So the frontal lobe is the portion of the brain that allows reasoned decision-making and cognitive flexibility and executive functions like strategizing, organizing, and assessing the consequences of behaviors. Researchers have found that when adults process emotions, they generally do so in the frontal lobe. When young people process emotions, they do so in the amygdala, the brain's region that controls the fight or flight. So you guys have probably heard of fight or flight before. So when emotions are involved, and for many young people that is all the time, they are less likely to engage in good reasoning about a situation. They do not think, they feel, and they act. People learn to make good choices by paying attention to consequences in their actions. However, it's much harder to figure out the consequences and actions if you're online or in a fantasy land or cyberspace, right? So also just that quick reaction, you don't have time to really think through those consequences as we may as adults. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to, like I mentioned, go through some more specific statistics, but I would like to highlight on this, unfortunately, the reality is that we are responding to and seeing more younger kids with suicidal ideation and at least expressing thoughts of wanting to die or not be alive any longer. So it is alarming. And it is happening, and statistically there are more that actually at younger ages do die by suicide. So next slide. So why do we want to talk about this? So we talk about other forms of safety, right? With our kids, seatbelt safety, crossing the street, kind of the daily things that we're talking to kids about, but again, this prevalence of this of suicide is so high that it is important to also be talking to them about this as well. So some of the statistics that I have, they're fairly, they won't be up here, but they're fairly recent within the last couple of years. But for just to kind of put it out there for the nation, there's about 48,000 deaths annually attributed to people dying by suicide. So it's a lot of individuals that lose their life by that form of death. So in the U.S., one suicide every 11 minutes, or 130 suicides every day. So this is for children ages 15 to 24. 5,954 young people die by suicide each year. Now that was a 2019 statistic. But that's at a rate of one suicide every 2 hours. It's a national statistic, but still, quite a few. So it's one of the leading causes of death, and that kind of has fluctuated to some degree, but it is still up there as a leading cause of death. So there's an estimated 25 attempts for each documented death. So, and then there's even more people that are having the thoughts, if not attempting and or then dying by suicide. I thought this was very interesting and eye-opening too about the impact that suicide can have on individuals. So for every attempt, every completed suicide, there's 135 people that are exposed, 53 have short-term disruption in life, 25 have a major life disruption, and 11 have devastating effects on their life. So it really has consequences and impacts for all of us, including our kids, right? So if we're experiencing it, so are our kids. So what we take away from these statistics is that our young people are challenged by thoughts and feelings about suicide. And we as their parents, educators, and caregivers need to be better prepared to deal with this disturbing reality. Because young people spend the greatest amount of time in their schools, one of the easiest ways to integrate learning about suicide prevention into the lives of our children is in the educational setting. And we've been fortunate to be working alongside of the Western Boone School Corporation to implement this for the students in the corporation. I've had the privilege of teaching some of these lessons in another corporation for a few years now, and I can say, I really don't feel like I can say enough positive things about the impact it has with the kids and the conversations it opens up and allows us to have. So I was pretty excited about it when I first studied the material, but then in actually having that experience with the kids, I think it's a really great thing. And so, yes, kudos to the Western Boone Corporation for working behind the scenes with me for several months on getting this prepared to roll out for your kids. So now, next slide, we're going to talk about answering some common questions, because there are a lot of myths, of course, about this topic. And Laura actually at the end of this does have copies of like an FAQ that she can hand out if you're interested to take along with you. So we should be on slide 7. Can talking about suicide plant the idea in the minds of vulnerable youth? What do you guys think? No? Don't know. Okay. That's good. Thank you for participating. You are correct. That answer is no, actually. Sadly, they're probably already having some sort of thought somewhere along the lines, right? Again, this is information that's out there. It's in the media. It's maybe their peers talking about it. Whatever the case may be, they've heard about it, right? They to some degree they have heard about it. So, and we do this in the Lifelines program, so it is interesting if you go into any of our high school classrooms and ask if they know anyone who has attempted or completed suicide, about 75%, sometimes more, will respond affirmatively. They will raise their hand that they know somebody. So again, another reason, just to reinforce the importance of this topic, the Lifelines prevention curriculum we'll be using here at Western Boone is based on research about the most effective classroom interventions, focuses on helping students recognize the signs of risk in peers, identify ways they can express their concerns, and to talk to adults about their concerns. Because research has shown that the adolescents are often reluctant to talk with school-based adults about their concerns, the curriculum focuses on helping students realize that adults in their school can be resources and encourages them to identify at least one adult in the school to whom they are willing to turn. And that has been really powerful as well. And I think in just reading it, like, oh, what kind of, does that put burden or pressure maybe on someone? But really they have burden and pressure when they hear about this and they don't know what to do or feel like they have support and how to turn. And so I think through this program, it just really empowers them and gives them more comfort in knowing that if and probably when they face some situation, they know who to go to and who to talk to. And I'm going to guess likely those of you in this room are also going to be selected as their person, and that's awesome, and the kids need that. So just wanted to kind of put that out there too. So slide 8. So how about this one? Is talking about suicide just a way for the kids to get attention? Maybe. I think people are like, maybe. Okay. And it's tough. It's tough to really think that way. We don't want to think that way. But we want to take everything seriously, right? Because we don't want to be wrong on that. Okay? And I think that's just one of the important things to think about. But if they are talking about it for attention, there's likely something else going on, even if it isn't that they want to die, okay? So I don't want us to be scared and afraid, but just aware, right, and how we navigate that and what we do to support the kids. Because I have found in working in this field that often there is something there that maybe not actually suicide, but something that they are hurting about. So please just be aware of that. Everyone should take it seriously. If your child says or does anything that relates to suicide, take it seriously. Consult with a professional if you need to form a more objective opinion on what's going on. Just don't ignore the behaviors. And I will say I do recognize the challenge that there is within that, especially more so now than ever. But we do have a great relationship with the school corporation, and if there is a kid in crisis needing an assessment, we do those assessments and can navigate that if that's helpful or beneficial or needed. Let's see. So sometimes it's a little challenging to navigate because we may not have direct communication from our youth about what's going on, or they may say something a little more vague, like I'm just tired, or I don't want to go on, or so getting them to elaborate, tell me more, it's a good thing. Can you tell me more about that? Thank you for sharing. And really focusing and paying attention to what they have to say is super important, because sometimes it will go down the path of needing more of an intervention, but sometimes those are expressions, right? So that becomes a little more challenging. But I would encourage you to continue to have conversations. And not all of these expressions indicate that your child is suicidal. What all of them do tell you, however, is that your child is struggling with something right now and needs some adult help. All right, slide 9. What are some things that put youth at risk for suicide? Does anybody know? So we're going to talk about risk factors and warning signs as well as protective factors. So when we think about one visual that Lifelines talks about is the stop sign visual. So warning signs, risk factors, and protective factors. That's on slide 10. I don't know if I can. Okay, Laura's got it. Scroll up a little. So with this analogy, the yellow would be the risk factors, and it reminds us to slow down, to take a closer look, okay? So sometimes including, some of the risk factors include having a family history of suicide, it being diagnosed with some type of mental health disorder, having a previous attempt, being exposed to a peer's death, for any circumstance. It doesn't have to be just by suicide. So the death of another often makes us think about our own death and mortality. For preteens, teens, and young adults who are struggling to find their own identities and place in life, being confronted with mortality can be a very unsettling emotionally, and some youth, young people who are already vulnerable in one way or another may think about dying themselves. What's important to remember about the risk factors, though, is that they are simply risk factors. So to liken it like, if you go to the doctor and you're at risk for maybe type 2 diabetes or a heart attack, right? It doesn't mean you're going to have one, but it means that you're at greater risk. So just things to be mindful of and pay closer attention to. Any questions on that? Okay. Well, if you think of one, just let me know. So we're going to go through this acronym, FACTS, which we also have a handout to send with you as well. So feelings, actions, changes, threats, and situations. So there's a lot of information on that. I won't go through every single piece of it, but it does break it down on this sheet that I'll give you before you leave here today. So sometimes our warning signs are definitely very individualized to the person. We're complicated individuals. But there is also research out there that contributes to these warning signs as well. So in kind of going through, that's how the Lifelines program organizes the warning signs using this acronym based on that information from research. So for the feelings, you may feel hopeless, worthless, emptiness, anxious, just a variety of different things. The actions would be examples like stockpiling pills, obtaining a gun, behaving recklessly. Changes, which is also, as guardians, something you will definitely probably notice, but just withdrawing, sleeping more, eating patterns change. But our school professionals definitely see that as well. As we talked, they're spending a lot of hours with them. So there's certainly good partners in this. Threats. Some students make or some of them make or intimidate or act on threats. These can be specific verbal statements, but they could be, like I said, a little more indirect. And then the situations include things like getting in trouble at home, school, maybe getting suspended. Those kinds of situational things can put someone more at risk. And then when they feel overwhelmed, maybe transitioning, a lot of peer pressure at this age, competition in those ways. So there's just a variety of things that make this so complex. Again, but having those conversations, I think at the end of the day will hopefully help you guys feel more at ease and just knowing kind of where your student is and how they're feeling in general. So the next slide, the perfect storm here. A suicidal crisis can occur when risk factors and warning signs come together to create a situation. So kind of like here, this analogy of a hurricane, we have to have the water, temperatures, just all the things in place, right, for this to occur. And the same thing is for a completed suicide. However, when we insert an intervention in the mix of that, then there is more hope and ability to kind of hopefully get someone the help that they need to feel better. I guess one question I have for you all is, do you think that our youth, if they are suicidal, they will always be suicidal or have suicidal thoughts? No? Good, correct. That is correct. It's often providing that right hope. Sometimes, again, we're individuals. It may take longer. It may take more work. It may take trying just different things to help support them. But a big thing, and when we talk about this in a QPR training, a suicide prevention training that we do, we talk about instilling hope in people. And so that would be the same for our youth. And oftentimes they are very resilient. So we'll talk about that here soon when we go into protective factors. So what is our school doing about suicide prevention? Next slide. And you can go to the next one, Laura. Lifelines Prevention Program. So this here is the program goal: to develop the school-based expertise and supports needed for responding to the problem of youth suicidal behavior. So Western Boone has a protocol process that they go through, and their teachers have gone through kind of a similar PowerPoint and are prepared that students are going to be talking more about prevention in their upcoming classes. And so they know, what their plan is and how they can support the kids and what steps to take based on maybe conversations that are had. So for the students, we want them to readily, let's see, the first objective, let me back up, to the Lifelines Prevention Program is to increase the likelihood that those who encounter potentially suicidal youth can take these steps. Readily identify them, know how to respond, know how to quickly get help, and always be ready to take such action. So the curriculum for the students will be delivered to the students, as I mentioned at the beginning, in our health classes, both at the middle school and high school level. It is an evidence-based curriculum correlated to national curriculum standards and covers basic facts about suicide and outlines the student's role in suicide prevention. Students will also learn about the resources available in the school and the importance of having a trusted adult in their lives, especially when they need help. And I'm confident that the adults here in the school corporation are all prepared and are trusted adults. So if that is one that your youth has identified as someone they can go to, I think it would be, no matter who it is, I'm guessing it's probably a good choice. So I'm glad that they are all very much on board. So Lifeline Prevention, it's involved to, it's designed to involve everyone, I should say, in the school community, including the administrators, the faculty, other community members. Mr. Miller opened this up to anybody in the community that wanted to be present, even if their student isn't currently going to be going through. And I think that's super important because we know what's going on, we're aware of what's happening, and we're getting some ideas, at least, right? Some seeds planted on how we can support our kids. So you play a key role in the prevention process. And this is just designed to help you a little bit more about why Western Boone has decided to address the important topic. And we do have a resource handout. Hopefully not too many handouts for y'all, but I think there's 4. So we do have a lot of great resources. People, I think, until you're in that mode, though, of actually needing it, you don't generally know where to go. So I have been trying to be better about just kind of taking those along with me and giving them to people, because even if we're not in crisis right now, you never know when that may arise. And it doesn't mean that it's somebody that's suicidal per se. It could be another type of crisis, and there are definitely a lot of those that we all have to face each day. So, slide 15. I'll go ahead and read those in case you can't see so well. So students will recognize the threat of suicidal thoughts and behavior and take troubled peers seriously, know relevant facts about suicide, including warning signs, demonstrate positive attitudes about intervention and help-seeking behavior, know how to respond to troubled peers, know resources, and be able to name one helpful adult, as we've said. And then, Laura, if you want to go to slide 17. So here are those protective factors that we're going to talk about. So are there other things that can protect young people from suicide risk? Yes, that's the good news. And the caregivers have an important role to help build protective factors. So that'll be personal, behavioral, situational characteristics that contribute to resiliency and serve as a buffer against risk. Does anybody have a protective factor they want to throw out there? Athletics, yeah, I like it. Love it. Yeah, being engaged, absolutely. Faith, yeah, that's a great one. For some, that is definitely very, very important, and certainly something we definitely would want to explore, right? Okay, so slide 19. So by now you're probably not surprised to hear a contact with a caring adult. Sense of connection, essentially. You mentioned faith, you mentioned athletics, both very good examples. Positive self-esteem and good coping skills. Sometimes we have to work with our youth. Unfortunately, some of them have low self-esteem, but if we work with them to build that up in a variety of ways, it can really make a big difference. Access to care for emotional and physical problems, or for alcohol or other drug use. And then the cultural or religious beliefs are other protective factors. Okay, so we're on slide 20 when you when you get it figured out. Give in or fits. So what are some ways that you as parents can foster protective factors? Mm-hmm.
to us or sing to us and things like that.
Yeah, getting them involved, leading by example. It's great. So teaching your children it's okay to ask for help. Help them identify the trusted adults. Encourage the participation in those activities. Sometimes I know my nephew would rather, he would say he would rather be at home playing his video games, but when we encourage him to go, to soccer practice, he has the best time ever. So just really getting them engaged, right? Acknowledging their efforts. It's so important. They do a lot. They have a lot going on, and it's nice. We like to be acknowledged, and so do they. So just a really great thing to remember to do. Be a good listener as often as you can. Okay, so the next slide here, how to talk to your children. Picking a good time, being conversational, being honest, and being direct. And it's just so important to listen to what they have to say, even if they may be telling you the same story for the 10th time. It's important to them, and they want you to hear it, right? So anything you can do to be engaged with them and present with them is going to be positive. As I mentioned kind of earlier on, some of the magic words, tell me more. So getting more information so that you can understand and revisit the conversation. It shows them that you've listened and that you're interested, and I think that's just a really great way, a simple way. Any questions on all that? Probably pretty intuitive and straightforward, but sometimes we need a little reminder. And it's also probably comforting to know that if you do regularly do these things, then hey, we're kind of on the right track there, right? Because again, there's not a lot of, guidance for each individual child. We're figuring it out as we go along. So, slide 23. If you're worried, act immediately if you have concerns about suicide, if your child talks about suicide. So you can call for local help. You can always go to the emergency departments, depending on how serious things are. There are crisis units that have behavioral health units. Close ones for us are that have youth beds are at St. Vincent and Community Health Network. But even if you, obviously we're local here, were to go to the emergency departments here in town, they can help make sure you're safe and get to the right space if it becomes that urgent. Again, talking with the school personnel, the counseling department, they can connect you accordingly, because it really oftentimes can be an outpatient provider like us, for example, that can provide that assessment. And if there isn't a need for hospitalization, we're not going to go there. If we feel like there's other ways we can keep the child safe, we want to be in the least restrictive environment. But there are times where we need that higher level of care just to get things stabilized. So if we do an assessment or any other provider, we are fortunate in the sense that there are a variety of providers in our community. They should create a safety plan, and that should be reviewed with you, and hopefully you will have a physical copy, and I would encourage you to share it with the school, because it's important that we're all on the same page to help support our students. So one of the things that I know they do is ask for a copy of that. It is your right to deny them that copy, but just wanted to put that out there, that kind of the more we're all working toward the same thing and working together on supporting someone, I think the better outcomes we will have. Let's see. Go to 24. So what happens if you need to get help? So I kind of mentioned this evaluation, so we'll essentially be focused in that moment on the risk that there is in that moment. It won't be like an entire history of, in treatment or anything. This is literally a urgent situation that we're assessing for if there is a risk right now. And so there will be questions that we will ask the child and go through, and then, like I mentioned, that safety plan. They may just, the person doing the assessment may just suggest they engage in services. Sometimes they're already engaged in services, so making that provider aware that they had this situation occur or that they were having these feelings. So yeah, if they get into mental health services, there's a variety of different things. I think a very common is individual therapy, but there may be group therapy. We're fortunate to have a child and adolescent psychiatrist on our team, and so sometimes medication is helpful and beneficial. We don't do medication only. We prefer to kind of work on those rewiring the brain essentially through therapy and processing. But sometimes we kind of need to go with both. And that's more of the gold standard of treatment. So we do have that access to our doctor, and those are kind of the main modalities, but there's other types of supports from like skills training to more like support groups. So there's stuff out there. Sometimes it's a matter of knowing where to look, and then sometimes in today's world it's availability is hard to come by, but I would encourage you just to be persistent and make sure you get what you need. All right. So slide 26. So Lifelines, or Hazelden, had some suggested questions for you as guardians to maybe ask. This kind of should be some of the things that are being addressed with you, but if you don't hear it or remember it or something, it's just something to be aware of, so that you know how to move forward with your student. All right, so we're almost done. You can go ahead to slide 27. So as caregivers, you play a crucial role in suicide prevention. Know your child's moods and behaviors better than anyone else. If you see a behavior that concerns you, ask your child about it. And then just some suggestions on how you can be a partner in prevention. As I mentioned, it takes all of us. We're all a part to some degree in our youth's lives. So be an advocate, become educated in youth suicide, alert to what's going on in the community, be nosy, just really pay attention to those behaviors and know your resources. If they need mental health services, be educated on what's out there and what you can get them connected to. And stay concerned. So that is the end of this parent and guardian presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions that may have come up. Or if you want to ask when the camera's off, we can do that too. And I can stick around if you think of something, or if you think of something later. I would say that definitely reach out to the school, and they can help guide you in the right direction. But I do thank you very much for making this a priority this evening and being here, and thank you to Western Boone for implementing this program. I think that's really great. So I hope you have a good night.